Good evening to the prayers of holy followers of Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Christ is risen. This is Father Joseph Swaden, and I will add that for those new here, I've worked in Orthodox apologetics since 1998. I'm the founder of NFT, True Orthodox and Ecumenical News, since 2004. We've been in the apologetic space on Facebook since 2016 and on YouTube since 2018. Today will be a bit of an interesting episode. I wasn't really sure how to title it. It seems like all the dirty laundry is coming out. So before we get to our video featuring, I don't know if it's Bojan, I have no idea how to pronounce it. I just call him Cartoon Man because that's kind of what everyone knows him for. And he started kind of a channel for arguing stuff. So, well, he seems to have invited this argument. But before we get to that, I thought I would touch on a very interesting thing. As I mentioned, it seems like all the dirty laundry is now coming out in World Orthodoxy in the past couple of weeks. So this is the newest example of things going wrong. And that was published this Monday on Orthodox History. Should Antioch make its own chrism? I believe we've mentioned this on our program a couple of times because Antioch has along with a few other of the local World Orthodox churches, specifically the big three of Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem, because they were all Greek patriarchates before the 20th century, with Antioch changing only recently, Cyprus, which again, part of Greece, and then all of the new churches, autocephaly, supposedly like Albania, Poland, Greece, they all got their chrism from Constantinople. And it turns out that if you're waiting on Constantinople to give you chrism, okay, someone says, sounds like Boyan. Okay, I'll remember that. So, as people are discovering, as they run out of chrism, asking for the Ecumenical Patriarchate to give it to you can take time. And one of the things that priests were doing in some of these jurisdictions was to try to preserve the chrism, they would add oil to it. Unfortunately, chrism and oil are not the same thing. It's not just oil with spices. It's made with prayers and a special process. And I can say from personal experience, now that I get to, touch this stuff because, priest, it turns out that they don't even feel the same. Like, chrism is much waxier through the process and has a very, very distinct and holy odor to it. So much so that if you put two identical jars together of oil and chrism and they look the same in color, once you open them, it is impossible not to know which one is chrism. So this is where Antioch is realizing they have a problem because they're pretty much out of chrism and they've diluted a lot of it. And it's not just Antioch. It's quite a few of these jurisdictions. And people are like, well, what are we going to do? Should we make our own chrism? Yes, you're supposed to make your own chrism. You were doing it till 1724 and it became a Greek patriarchate. But, of course, this is now controversial. Whatever. Well, that was fun. So, unfortunately, this is stuff we've talked about. Everything is coming out in the end. And this video that we will be reviewing here by Bojan, the Cartoon Man, he is it's titled Historic Dialogue Between Orthodox and Anglican Churches. And I have watched the video, so I'm going to intersperse my thoughts on it. But I believe that this is what you call selling a bug as a feature. And what I mean by that is that Orthodox ecumenism with Anglicanism is pretty much marked by the 20th century. He gets a couple of things off, but that's okay. We're here to correct them. So let's get started with the video.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Orthodox Banter with Boyan. I'm the one in question, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about Eastern Orthodox practice or theology from my own personal knowledge and experience. So today's second question comes from Autumn2 PFR, and his or her question is, what was the history of development of the dialogue between the Anglican Communion on one side and the Orthodox Church on the other? And frankly, it's a rather interesting development. Up to the 19th century, I don't believe there was any contact between the Orthodox Church and the Anglican Church.
That's incorrect. There was actually contact between the non-jurors in the 17th century and 18th century with the Church of Russia. And so there was some contact, but it didn't go well because the Anglicans did not believe what the Orthodox did, and it kind of went badly. God bless you, Roca Remnant. Hello. And so let's continue.
So there was practically nothing. And what we've had in the 19th century, again, from what I know, it was very sporadic. It was basically based on individual initiative. And I believe that the Anglicans actually blocked the majority of the dialogue because of the Orthodox veneration of icons.
This is actually hugely factually wrong. Unfortunately, the late 19th century is what sets up for the period of ecumenism that, engulfed the 20th century. And we can't not take that into account. We have to keep in mind that this was a period during the general decline of the Ottoman Empire, which was a period where effectively, I hate to say it, but Orthodox Russia and the former, Protestant and Catholic kingdoms of Christendom, I should say, had, if you want to call it that, had an interest in helping the Ottoman Empire die off. In fact, the entire late 19th century to early 20th century, it colors this very real phenomenon and problem that is facing the Orthodox world as well as the Western world. So this is incorrect. This is where a lot of those original meetings begin to occur, and also where dialogue with Anglicanism opened up in the form of with the old Catholics, because of what was happening with papal infallibility. You see, one thing to keep in mind here is that Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, and Protestantism were, even in these periods, they were in conflict. And so sometimes that conflict could be weaponized one against the other. For example, in the late 19th century, began the question in the Roman Catholic Church on the validity of Anglican orders, something which they had kind of declared no with Apostolicae Curiae. So then basically the Anglicans, for their part, figured that if they could get the East to recognize them, then they would look more like a legitimate contender to be the real Orthodox Catholic Church of the West. So no, none of this is correct. This is not accidental by any means.
However, come 20th century and things have changed considerably. The dialogue has become much more official. And by the way, this dialogue generally was not mere, common goals, social activities, and so on. I believe they were actually trying really hard to achieve some sort of actual practical liturgical unity. And when we see how these things developed, it did make sense at the time because, when you look at, early 20th century Anglicanism, you basically have Catholicism that was sort of, not really, but sort of petrified in the 16th century. You do not have papal infallibility. You do not have the Immaculate Conception. And one of the big things that separates Catholics and Orthodox, that is papal supremacy, is a non-issue with the Anglican Communion. So
I'm trying to understand him here. It sounds like he's implying that Roman Catholics didn't have a papal infallibility or papal supremacy issue. Certainly, they didn't dogmatize papal infallibility, but it was pretty well believed in the 17th and 16th centuries. Further, the idea of papal supremacy was always there. Granted, now the Anglicans did rebel against that, but the idea that they were identical to the Roman Catholic Church in some way, even in liturgical practice, is a bit much. Yes, they had very ornate services, but some of especially the stuff that came out of the Reformation, not like the untouched stuff like the Ceramite, but the post-Reformation stuff was terrible. They may not have been aware of that, but to imply that it was just like Roman Catholicism is quite a mistake. And I don't think it's a mistake they would have made. Well, no, by the Anglicans is his point. Well, yeah, but that's my point. It still isn't exactly accurate, but we'll keep going.
Things were, going great. In fact, during the I believe First or maybe even Second World War, the Anglican Church was kind enough that they actually hosted a large number of Serbian seminarians, and they even allowed for the Orthodox liturgies to be served in their churches. So up to this day, the Serbian Orthodox Church allows Anglicans to serve the Eucharist at the Patriarchal Chapel of Saint Simeon of Mirgasher. This season,
he just blew over most of the bilateral dialogues between the Anglicans and what we would call the state churches. And so I'm just going to switch to this. There's like entire books on this that talks about different stages of recognition. Constantinople, right after the release of the 1920 encyclical, basically implies, for example, that Anglicans have valid orders. This was also the case in Romania. And for those who think that maybe I'm misreading it, I direct you to Patriarch Sergius of Moscow. Yeah, that Patriarch Sergius, as in Sergianism Sergius. If we go to past the 1930 Lambeth conference, which is right around when they started talking about birth control too. Let me get back here. I want to see if I can find what was the great quote I read from Sergius of Moscow in this, not because it was so orthodox, but because of how telling it was, considering that it was written in 1935. So this would have been, the meaning of the apostolic succession of the non-Orthodox faith. This is Sergius of Moscow. But this is in 1935. So this is 7 years after the declaration of 8 years after the declaration of loyalty to the Soviet government. But here it gets interesting. What he says is, having recognized Anglican ordination, the Greek Church logically ought to modify and perhaps already has modified its practice with reference to Catholics as well. And so the footnote says, strictly speaking, of course, the Greek Church, which has recognized Anglican ordination, means those of the Greek-speaking Orthodox churches which have done so. The same lack of consistency characterizes the practice of the ancient church in respect to different bodies. It would be useless to look for an item in this variety of practice or to search for dogmatic foundations in the actions of the church. There is no system here, no dogmatic foundations oblige the church to use a second or third type of reception instead of the first. Even the way he addresses the other forms of reception besides baptism are kind of flippant here. But the real reason I'm putting this on the screen is that you can see that even in 1935, at the highest levels, Patriarchate of Moscow recognized that the Patriarchate of Constantinople was indeed recognizing Anglican mysteries, supposed mysteries, and as so was the New Calendar Church of Romania. But it is also important to remember that here in 1935, up to the time Bojan's talking about, or Bojan, you have the true Orthodox in Greece, and you have the Catacomb Church in Russia, and you have the Catacomb Church in Romania, who are all literally fighting for not just for the survival of their church, but even for just the preservation of, their way of life. I can't say their lives because a lot of them were martyred. But the very fact that you have the confessing church there, and then these people are busy making deals with the Anglicans, mostly because of geopolitics and because they want to kind of figure out what to do next in the aftermath of the collapse of first the Ottoman Empire and then the Russian Empire. So let's continue. I went looking for this and did not find. Not by me. They didn't have papal infallibility. Well, the Romans did though. Yeah, it's still not good. Yes, Patriarch Sergius. Absolutely, this is what we're getting at. Patriarch Sergius. But give me just a moment here. What he's talking about here is kind of getting goofy. Just one moment. Let me see here. Okay, we got that one there. Okay. And so let me see here. Yeah, I'm putting it back. Sorry about that. 1 second.
Specificities, I can't say that word. However, it all came crashing down in the 70s when Anglicans decided to ordain women.
Like that.
And that is when it all fell apart, sadly. And ever since, the Anglicans have dug themselves deeper into these positions that separate them from the Orthodox. Now it's not only ordination of women to priesthood and episcopate, but it's also having marriage services between the homosexuals and all of these other practices that are totally alien to the Orthodox Church.
I guess he means like this. But in any case, the point is that they're actually closer now than they've ever been, ironically, to the very Anglicans that they are supposedly separated from. So let's see how this ends.
It is a sad story. The initial rejection of unity by Anglicans because of icons, and I believe that the actual formal unity between the Orthodox and the Anglicans later on, when things were peaking, was actually because Bulgarians insisted that the Anglicans accept the doctrine of transubstantiation, which the Anglicans resisted. And of course,
in actuality, as a result of, for example, with the non-jurors, one of the reasons that the Orthodox couldn't proceed further with any union discussions is because the Orthodox parties asked for what would be a complete confession of faith from them, and then they realized that the Anglicans wanted the exact opposite because they viewed it as they had, of course, many different groups with many different belief systems, and so such a solid one set of beliefs concept was not only alien to them, but they saw the Orthodox as having an incomplete worldview. So it was not nearly presented like this, and it certainly had less to do with transubstantiation than anything else.
You may say, well, that's Catholic teaching. Well, yeah, but some Orthodox accept it, and I myself don't have any issue with it. I mean, it sort of just describes what's happening with the communion, not the manner or way. Actually, it's more of describing the practical experience of what happens to the Eucharist. It still does look and taste like bread and wine. So yeah, it is a sad story where some liturgical unity was barely restored and nothing came out of it and nothing will come of it unless, of course, we have individual parishes or priests or bishops converting to Orthodoxy. I know of 2 cases of Orthodox converting to Anglicanism. It's comparatively rare, I think, because of all of these issues I listed and because the history of Anglicanism is that sketchy with King Henry saying no to Pope because of the divorces, but those initial beginnings clearly did not impact the Orthodox leadership too much in order to provide for possible future liturgical unity. Practically every.
There was also the fact that the Anglicans tried to undermine the Orthodox mission in America by offering ministrations to Orthodox where mission parishes were being formed, something that caused Bishop and later St. Raphael Helini to actually write that no communion could take place or even common prayer with the Anglicans once he realized what the game was about. So far from being a tragic event and far from it being sad that the Orthodox and Anglicans aren't in communion, in reality, they're not in communion for very good reasons, despite the best attempts of the ecumenists to make that communion happen.
Everything that I have said here, I'm simply, as you would say in Serbian, pulling out of my little brain. I can't really quote you any sources or anything. I'm just trying to remember.
Yeah, like the St. Nikolai thing, which to my knowledge, I looked it up. It does not look like it ever happened to me. Maybe he accidentally communed a layman. No idea. I wouldn't put it past the Anglicans to try to receive, to prove a point. But in any case, yeah, it's all based on rumors, bad history, but love the cartoons. So let's close out there. And with that, I think we can get going. I just wanted to touch upon that. That video came out yesterday, but there were so many things wrong with it that I really wanted to just deal with it outright and deal with a lot of the historical misrepresentations that you could fit in 7 minutes. And as always, I will see you on Sunday. So thanks to our listeners who asked questions and had comments, and those who support our mission. Support the channel. We at NFTU need your help. Support us by subscribing or donating at nftu.net, on GiveSendGo, or on Odyssey. We remember all of you in our prayers, and thank you for all your support for NFTU.